A history lesson, but an undying symbol of our relentless quest as Republicans for freedom and justice. Early in the morning, on the 25th of May 1798, exactly 227 years ago today, the Battle of Carlow took place, when our brave rebels rose in support of the 1798 rebellion, which had begun the day before in Kildare. The United Irishmen organisation in Carlow, led by a young brogue maker named Mick Hayden, set off at dawn to take over the main town of Carlow, and picking up more volunteers along the way, their numbers swelled to over 1,000 as they marched completely unopposed towards the main streets. They devised a plan of attack that would take place simultaneously from 4 different directions through the 4 main streets of Carlow. 1, from Bennekerry into Ryland, an assault would be made into Tullow Street. 2, from Bar, people would march in through Burn Street. 3, from Laois, the attack would be across Graig Bridge, over the Barrow and past the old Norman Castle. 4, from Palatine and Maganey, Dublin Street would be infiltrated. All would then converge on Potato Market from there. As the various contingents advanced, they did not realise that the British Army had the military awaiting in the barracks and the town on high alert. The rebels' every move was known in advance. A strong military were stationed in the courthouse, which is now known as Dayton Hall. Another party, with 2 small cannons, were stationed on Graig Bridge. In Dublin Street and to the north, well-armed loyalists filled some large strong houses, but without military support, as the attack was known to be weak from that quarter. Tullow Street was left open and to all appearances seemed undefended against what was expected to be the strongest attack of all. The trap was laid. When the rebels entered the town of Carlow, they were joined not only by the Catholic inhabitants, but also by people who had arrived there during the previous day and night after hearing of the plans. It was all looking quite positive for the rebels at this point. A crowd of approximately 200 people broke away and marched through Tullow Street, thinking the Brits had retreated, but when they reached Potato Market, their fortunes changed. The forewarned garrison had prepared a deadly ambush, posting men at every window and rooftop. As the rebels relaxed after their apparently easy victory, the concealed soldiers poured volley after volley of gunfire into the masses and slaughtering the exposed Irish men and women. Taken completely by surprise, the shocked and poorly armed rebels broke and fled, only to run into another army ambush that was waiting for them on Tullow Street. The survivors tried to escape by breaking through adjoining houses and cabins in the town, which were set alight by the pursuing British soldiers, causing the deaths of approximately 200 innocent residents. One survivor, William Farrell, wrote of the carnage, "I know a man, as gentle as any, who woke to realise his house was on fire that night. He threw on some clothes and ran to the street, carrying his young daughter in his arms. He was instantly shot dead, along with his child." In the meantime, the Laois rebels, on their way to assist, having heard reports of the battle and hearing of the fate of their comrades, decided it was too late to help and changed their plans. They were led by men called Brennan. They proceeded to Ballochmyler instead, a few miles outside Carlow in the county of Laois, where they set fire to a number of loyalist houses. 21 of the Laois rebels were killed in the fray in Ballochmyler, but despite this they eventually overcame the loyalist inhabitants. An estimated 500 Irish rebels and civilians were killed by the British Army in the streets of Carlow that day. Another 140 were executed in their repression over the following 10 days. A local man who became known as Paddy the Pointer is reported to have helped to identify escaped rebels in the military by riding around the town, pointing them out over a number of days following the battle. The streets of Carlow were completely blood-stained as horses dragged corpses from the centre of town to the Croppy Graves. Some bodies had been so badly charred by fire they were separated into pieces and were kicked around the streets by soldiers. The mass grave that we stand upon here today is where the bodies of our brave volunteers were buried. These fearless men and women, armed with little more than their determination and love for their country, stood against British imperial forces much greater than themselves. With hearts full of hope and fierce belief in a sovereign Ireland, they fought not just for their time, but for all future generations, yearning for freedom. The Croppy Graves remain an enduring monument to those who laid down their lives. Each grave tells a story not only of loss but of inspiration, a reminder that our struggle is righteous, that our cause is just, and that liberty demands sacrifice. As Republicans, we understand that our fight is not for ourselves alone, but for Ireland's future. We owe it to the Croppies to carry their dreams into reality, to ensure that their sacrifices were not in vain. Today, as we commemorate their sacrifice, we also envision the Ireland of tomorrow, a united Ireland. It is a vision no less radical than the dreams of the men and women of 1798, a nation where differences are strengths, where unity triumphs over division. It will be an Ireland that honours its history through action, strives for inclusion, peace and prosperity, and champions the right to self-determination. Let us seize the torch that our ancestors lit and charge towards the dawn of a unified Ireland with resolve. The dream of 1798 did not perish with its valiant defenders. It lives on in each one of us here today. As we stand here on storied soil, let us honour it by being the generation that brings about the justice, unity and independence for which they fought and were massacred for. Together, let us pledge to stand side by side, as the United Irishmen did, in relentless pursuit of our cause for Irish unity. I will finish on a quote from Theobald Wolfe, the founding father of the United Irishmen and a leading figure in the fight for Irish independence from British rule, who famously once said, "To unite the whole people of Ireland, to abolish the memory of all past dissensions, and to substitute the common name of Irishman in place of the denominations of Protestant, Catholic and Dissenter. These were my means."
Thanks very much, Aaron. I'd like to call on Michael Kinsta now to sing the Croppy Boy.
First time to attack this one, but sure, yeah. It was early in the spring. The birds did whistle and sweetly swing, changing their notes from tree to tree, and the song they sang, Old Ireland Free. It was early in the night. The Oman cavalry gave me a fright. The Oman cavalry was my downfall, and I was taken by Lord Cornwall. 'Twas in the guardhouse where I was laid, and in the parlour where I was tried. My sentence passed and my courage low, when to Duncannon I was forced to go. As I was passing my father's door, my brother William stood at the door. My aged father stood at the door, and my tender mother her hair she tore. As I was going up Wexford Street, my own first cousin I chanced to meet. My own first cousin did me betray, and for one bare guinea sold my life away. As I was walking up Wexford Hill, who could blame me to cry my fill? I looked behind and I looked before, but my aged mother I shall see no more. And as I mounted the platform high, my aged father was standing by. My aged father did me deny. The name he gave me was the Croppy Boy. It was in Duncannon this young man died, and in Dungannon his body lies. And all you people that do pass by, oh, shed a tear for the Croppy Boy. And all you people who do pass by, Please shed a tear for all Croppy boys.
Mick, you never lost it. And I would like to call on a person that I have a lot of rows with every day of the week. Anya, my daughter.
And I always win. Look, we've been lucky enough so far. The rain is starting to hold off for us, but Andy was actually left a book in a will by Mr. Doyle, and this book is very precious to him. It's probably one of his most prized possessions, and it's called 98 in Carlow. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it. It's a very rare book, but it gives great accounts of all the people that are involved, like Peter Ivers and all in this book. But today I took extracts out of the book just to kind of give you a taste of kind of what's in it and the exact kind of horrendous and murderous actions that were put on the people here. So not a sound issued from the grey closed up buildings of the narrow street. Not a soul appeared to be stirring within. The whole place seemed deserted. Elated over what seemed an easy victory, the Croppies gave a yell of exultation, but immediately, as if by magic, the windows shuttered on both sides, flew open, and a fearful volley brought down 100 of them. From every window, from every rooftop, death rained down on them. The air seemed to vomit lead and flame. These raw fighters quickly lost their self-possession. In this shadow of death, this mouth of hell, stricken down by an invisible foe, they were sieged with panic, and in rushing for shelter, they plunged headlong into the army ambuscade in Barrack Street. They were caught in another murderous crossfire, which brought down the whole ranks at a time as well as the important leaders. Those who had escaped the lead threw away their weapons and dashed into the adjoining houses, hoping to find shelter. Now the troops began their barbarous work. They set fire to the dwellings sheltering the fugitives. 150 houses were consumed, as well as 200 of the unfortunate inmates. Those who attempted to escape were cut down by the soldiery. This part of the town now became a slaughterhouse. Every Orangeman who could shoulder a musket was at his window sniping the unfortunate rebels. Some were moving around among the wounded and dying, with hammers and butcher knives completing their murderous work. Of the 800 who were entered Tullow Street, 640 were shot, burned or murdered in cold blood. So that was just one of the extracts we took out. For 2 days the dead were carted in loads to Graig. They were thrown pell-mell into the sandpit, which is now here at the Croppy's grave, and they covered them with quicklime. 200 more were suspected of having taken part in the attack or in the movement, were brought before a court-martial and executed, many of them with great brutality. I know Aaron touched upon about Paddy the Pointer. So Paddy the Pointer was actually an informer who used to ride into town, and he was holding a long white rod which he pointed out the persons he wished to accuse of treason. This was led the victims to be immediately arrested and imprisoned in a stable known as the Gallows Yard. 100 of these unhappy people were pent up for months in these narrow spaces, and the majority of them died from starvation, which is, but there's just one more section I'm going to read out of the book, and bear with me. So it's called The Three Mars. I'm sure some people have heard this story. So William Farrell tells us that the three Mars brothers and O'Connor were brought into Tullow. The Mars lived in Ardriston in the parish of Tullow, on the right hand as you go from Tullow to Ballin. Up to 1939, 3 tall trees marked the site of the house, which is about 150 yards from the road. O'Connor lived near the Mars, less than half a mile cross country, but in the parish of Ballin. Farrell writes, "This certainly was a dreadful day. Among the many prisoners brought in was a man named O'Connor from Tullow, and 3 brothers named Marr, from very near the same place. I could never find out what crimes they were charged with, or what occasion there was to send them from Tullow to this town. Not to be tried, for there was no trial on them, but to be sacrificed. These 4 men were brought in to the Triangle, and were the first, I believe, punished in that way. For the blood that had spilled, so far from satisfying the rage of the soldiers, seemed only to increase their thirst for more. They began with the unfortunate Mars, and the youngest man of them was stripped and tied up first. They commenced cutting him with a cat o' nine tails, which is obviously we all know is a whip, with their fury for a considerable time. But failing to extort any confession from him, they actually began to use the Rough Riders' cutters' whips on him, till he was one wound from his shoulder to the calves of his legs. This torture was so excessive, he began to fail under it and cried out to them to stop. But as soon as his oldest brother heard him, he stamped his foot on the ground and exclaimed, "Oh, what are you going to do? Oh, let us die like men. Oh, let us die like brothers." This had the desired effect, and they uttered no complaint after he took his last gasp. Then they untied him and hung him up naked and bleeding as he was. The two other brothers were served in the same way, and it stood with a fortitude that astounded everyone, as they never cried out during the whole dreadful operation. O'Connor acted in a different part. Far from the first cut, he got to the last. He made battle with them, as for word could do it, by calling them murderers and every odious name he could think of. This increased their fury to such a degree that they made his flesh fly in every direction, until the bystanders were fairly disgusted with the exhibition. Even some soldiers, accustomed to see men flogged, turned away and could not bear to look at the horrid tragedy. When their fury was fully satisfied, they untied him and hung him up with the Mars. And what a pity it was, and what a loss it was to any country, to lose 4 such men, to have them lost in such a manner. These 4 men had no concern with it, with the attack, is what they're saying, on Carlow. But they were sent in from Tullow upon what charges I could never learn. But even if they were guilty of crime, surely hanging or shooting might have been sufficient punishment, without these savages butchering them in such a horrid manner. The 4 heroes were buried here in the Croppy Hole, it was called, which is now the Croppy's grave. And Miss Margaret Byrne, Henry Street, Graiguecullen, told the present writer that the mother of the 3 Mars came over to Graig and planted 3 trees in the plot with a spoon. And Miss Byrne was the mother of Miss Jim Nolan at the same address. And you know, Miss Marr actually, from Tullow, she came over here and planted these trees, and as you can see, they're not here, you know. But she used to get up every morning and she used to get their socks ready every day, and she used to go out and call their names. You know, which is horrific for any mother to go through that. But I'm going to finish up on that. I think that they were very important extracts. They are very graphic, but it's real, what happened. But we're going to call on Councillor Jim Dean. Jim is actually chairperson of the Peter Ivers Covenant, and we're going to ask him to read a poem from Willie Nolan from Ballin, and it's called The Battle of Carlow.
It is the dreary hour of sunrise in the glorious month of May, and the heated mist presses summer's splendour through the day. Muffled and stealthy in the silence sounds the noise of tramping feet. Men whose sons are free come marching up the narrow, gloomy street. I think what's now the issue of this long-awaited day, the agonised emotions of that hour before the fray. Do the redcoats know we're coming? Are the yeomen still asleep? All depends upon our silence and the vigilance they keep. But the traitor is before them and the sword already drawn, and the pearls of musket thunder echo through the reddened dawn. Vain their rally, soon 'tis over, in their hundreds brave they die, and the cabins where they shelter soon in blazing ruins lie. Talk not of their dismal failure, mock not at their courage vain, for today we reap the harvest which they sowed, that here were slain. Tales of cause lost blaze brightest when the battles bravely fought. Freedom's jewel is more precious when with blood 'tis dearly bought. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Sonia. The piper is going to play Ellie the Wife first. I don't know whether any of you have ever been in Athy, but Ray and Bridget and myself, there was a man called Paddy Wright who was a Shintown councillor in Athy, and Anya spoke about the triangle there. Athy is the only town in 32 counties of Ireland that has a triangle made out of limestone, so if you ever pass through Athy, stop and have a look, because that's a replica that was made out of stone. And really is something to look at, like, but Paddy was the instigation of that. He'd been fighting for years, and he was dead a good while now. But look at, I suppose Hewson's was the one that wrote the letter. He was a landlord over near Cullen. The Mar's mother worked there, and he wrote the letter. He was the one that put the Mar brothers and Tom Thomas, their uncle, to the sword. He was the one who sank them, their dead. And, look, there were sad times. But I suppose look at time passes, and it may pass, but you don't have to forget. Everybody for coming here today. Fair dues to everybody here, and I'd like to call on the piper to play the national anthem. Thank you.
This morning to come up here, so we really appreciate you, Tony. Give Tony another round of applause. Thanks very much. Just a last word, we're going over to Brennan's. There's a few sandwiches and stuff. You're all more than welcome to come over, and again, we really appreciate everyone coming up here today, especially on the 25th of May. It falls, and we'd like to thank the pikemen, and that's it from us, and we'll see you all again next year. Take care. Bye bye.